You've seen debates over the hijab as a symbol of oppression, but also as a marker of dignity. You've heard arguments that women's inheritance shares are too small, yet treasured as a divine provision. And you've watched communities champion male privilege, while others celebrate female scholarship rising under mosque domes. I'm Fakir al-Khamosh. In these 8 scenes, we'll confront the fiercest controversies. Does Islam bind women or set them free? In the Quran, the term khimar signifies a head covering for adult women, originally meant to distinguish the believing community and protect dignity in 7th century Arabia. Yet centuries of cultural accretions have colored its meaning. Divine intent, verses 24:31 and 33:59, frame hijab as an ethical safeguard. Let them draw their veils over their bosoms, aiming to curb harassment and affirm respect. Cultural overlay, tribal customs, climate, and class shaped the shape and style of coverings, from flowing jilbabs in the Gulf to simple headscarves in North Africa. Modern polarization. Western media often fixates on forced veiling, while many Muslim women describe hijab as a conscious act of faith and identity. When a garment is mandated, is it a burden or a banner of belonging? Can a single rule on modesty accommodate diverse expressions of dignity? Does forced unveiling ever liberate or only expose deeper inequalities? In the dawn of Islam, the Prophet declared, "Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim, indiscriminately invoking both men and women." His wife Aisha radiated this principle. She taught thousands of companions, narrated over 2,000 hadiths, and led scholars in Medina. Early precedent. Aisha's scholarly circle offered women direct access to fiqh, Quranic interpretation, and medicine. She advised Caliph Umar on public policy, evidencing that female erudition shaped the Muslim polity. Medieval institutions. By the 10th century, women endowed waqf to fund learning. Fatima al-Fihri built the Qarawiyyin Mosque and University in Fez, 859 CE, the world's oldest continuously operating institution. Muslim women served as lecturers, Udwat al-Ma'ahid, across Andalusia and Persia. Modern revival. Today, universities such as Al-Azhar in Cairo admit female jurists and theologians. Scholarships from Malaysia's International Islamic University promote gender parity. Yet obstacles persist. In some regions, families restrict girls' schooling under misread notions of honor. If Islam elevated women's learning at its inception, why do cultural biases still deny education to millions? Can reviving classical examples uproot patriarchal traditions masquerading as religious mandates? What responsibility does the global Ummah bear to ensure every Muslim woman reads the book she is commanded to understand? Quran 4:7 proclaims, "To men is allotted what they earn, and to women what they earn." Then 4:11 stipulates fixed shares. A daughter receives half the son's portion. A widow inherits a quarter if children exist. These formulas were revolutionary, guaranteeing women unprecedented economic security in 7th century Arabia. Social impact. In tribes where female destitution was common, these inheritance rights provided dowries, business capital, and widows' sustenance. A female merchant could reinvest her share, underpinning early Islamic commerce. Juristic nuance. Schools varied. Hanafi jurists allowed bequests up to 1/3 beyond fixed shares. Malik scholars recognized the widow's right to residency, idah, maintenance from the estate. This flexibility ensured both justice and welfare. Contemporary challenges. Modern legislators wrestle with gender equity. Tunisia's 1956 Personal Status Code equalized shares for male and female heirs. Morocco debates similar reforms under ijtihad principles. Critics caution against unilateral change without broad scholarly consensus, warning of undermining divine mandate. Can contextual reinterpretation honor the Quranic spirit of justice without contravening text? Does equalizing shares advance social welfare or erode the balance between familial responsibilities and rights envisioned by the Sharia? How do we reconcile divine prescription with modern ideals of gender parity? In the tapestry of Islamic family law, polygamy often looms largest. The Quran permits a man to marry 2, 3, or 4, but if you fear you cannot deal justly, then only 1, 4, 3. Yet, how has this allowance played out across centuries, and what does it mean today for women's agency? Historical rationale. In 7th century Arabia, tribal wars and male fatalities created a surplus of widows and orphans. Polygamy functioned as social welfare. A man marrying multiple wives provided shelter and financial support to vulnerable women and their children. The stipulation of justice aimed to prevent neglect, equal dowries, housing, and time with each wife. It wasn't a license for caprice, but a measured concession to social realities. Contractual protections, Hijab and Kabul. Islamic marriage is a contract. A woman may negotiate terms, monogamy clause, deferred dower, stipulations on residence and maintenance. Classical jurists upheld that such stipulations are binding. If the husband violates them, she may seek khul, divorce with compensation, or judicial annulment. Malik versus Hanaf. Views. Maliks were more flexible, allowing women stronger contractual leverage. Hanafis granted husbands greater latitude, but stressed financial obligations. Over time, many Muslim societies incorporated prenuptial agreements to safeguard women's rights. Modern debates, consent and transparency. Today's activists argue that polygamy must be consensual, explicit agreement by the first wife, informed consent by the prospective wife, and full financial disclosure. Some countries, e.g., Tunisia, Turkey, have outlawed polygamy outright. Others, e.g., Malaysia, require judicial approval demonstrating need and capacity. Demographic shifts. Declining fertility, urbanization, and women's economic empowerment challenge the original welfare rationale. In many societies, polygamy is increasingly rare and socially stigmatized, practiced mainly under patriarchal pressures rather than genuine social necessity. Voices of Women testimony from Cairo, Dr. Layla Al-Sharif, a family law scholar, recounts women who negotiated marriage contracts prohibiting polygamy, invoking fiqh principles of justice. When husbands attempted subsequent marriages, courts upheld the women's stipulations. Perspective from Lagos. In Nigeria, some Muslim women's unions teach contract drafting workshops, ensuring brides understand and assert their rights under Sharia, from maintenance to marriage duration. When the welfare justification no longer holds, does polygamy become a vestige of patriarchal privilege? Can contractual empowerment transform polygamy into a protective option rather than an oppressive norm? Should Muslim-majority states revisit Quranic stipulations in light of contemporary social and economic realities? In Surah An-Nisa 4:11-12, Allah prescribes fixed inheritance shares. Daughters receive half the share of sons. Spouses and parents inherit specific fractions. In 7th century Arabia, where widows and orphans often faced destitution, these rules overturned custom, granting women unprecedented financial security. But how have jurists and modern states navigated the tension between divine prescription and evolving notions of gender justice? Quranic mandate and early impact revolutionary equity. Before Islam, women's inheritance was ad hoc, tribal allocations or charitable gifts at a man's discretion. The Quran's precise formula established a system where every heir, male or female, knew her due, safeguarding widows' maintenance and daughters' futures. Social stabilizer. By ensuring that a widow received at least 1/8 of her husband's estate if children existed, the law prevented family fortunes from evaporating through male lineage alone. Orphans' shares, held in trust, funded their upbringing. Classical jurisprudence, flexibility within fixed shares, school variations, Hanaf jurists allowed bequests up to 1/3 of the estate beyond fixed shares, offering a margin for testators to honor special dependents. Malik scholars emphasized the welfare, maslaha, of heirs, permitting adjustments when strict application would cause hardship, e.g., consolidating small shares to ensure economic viability. Shafi'i and Hanbal authorities adhered closely to text, but recognized the principle of gharar, avoidance of injustice, advising judges to interpret ambiguous cases in favor of weaker parties. Modern legislative reforms, Tunisia, 1956 Personal Status Code, equalized inheritance shares in most cases, arguing that divine objectives, maqasid, of equity and social welfare now demand contextual reinterpretation. Introduced state oversight of waqf and abolished unilateral bequests that disinherited legal heirs. Outcome: studies show a 40% reduction in female poverty rates in rural areas, attributed partly to enhanced inheritance rights. Morocco, 2004 Mudawana revision. Retained Quranic shares, but expanded women's rights to manage their inherited property without male guardians. Established family courts with gender-balanced benches to adjudicate disputes, reducing bias and ensuring women's agency. Outcome: urban women's ownership of real estate rose from 12% to 27% by 2015. Jordan and Egypt. Jordan's 2017 draft inheritance bill proposed granting daughters equal shares with sons, a measure stalled amid conservative backlash. Egypt's 1956 reforms codified Sharia shares, but permitted testators to allocate the 1/3 bequest freely, often benefiting female relatives. NGOs report that many women now receive substantial legacies through written wills. Grassroots initiatives and legal clinics. Pakistan, female lawyers offer inheritance rights clinics in Karachi's informal settlements, helping women register wills, navigate tribal customs, and bring claims in Sharia courts. Reported success: 65% of participants secure rightful shares. Nigeria. In Kano State, the Islamic Legal Clinic trains imams to educate communities on inheritance rights, combining sermons with mobile court sessions. Over 2,000 women have reclaimed land and property since 2018. Economic and social implications. Women's entrepreneurship. Inheriting capital enables women to start small businesses, tailoring shops in Morocco, agribusiness cooperatives in Tunisia, fostering local economies and reducing dependency. Family dynamics. Legal empowerment can strain familial bonds when older generations resist changing customs. Mediation programs, modeled on restorative justice circles, resolve disputes by blending Sharia principles with dialogue. When divine shares rigidly apply to contemporary economies, do they uphold justice or require nuanced ijtihad to fulfill the Quran's spirit of welfare? Can equal inheritance for men and women be reconciled with the Quran's text through maqasid-driven interpretation? How do we ensure that legal reforms translate into social acceptance rather than provoke backlash that undermines women's security? In every age, knowledge has been the engine of empowerment. For Muslim women, access to education has toggled between visionary highs and regressive lows. Yet the potent scriptural mandate, read, remains unchallenged. Classical foundations, prophetic emphasis. The Prophet, peace be upon him, declared learning wajib, obligatory on every Muslim. Women like Aisha and Salama not only learned but taught, holding majalis in their homes, transmitting hadith and tafsir. Their scholarship shaped early fiqh, showing that the pursuit of knowledge has no gender boundary. Medieval flourish. In Cordoba, Hibat Allah al-Tawziya taught at the Great Mosque School. In Cairo, Zainab al-Ghazali's grandfather endowed funds for girls' Quranic circles. These examples underscore that women's learning was never incidental. It was woven into the intellectual fabric of Islam. Colonial disruption and revival. Colonial constraints. European powers often sidelined Islamic institutions, closing madaris and marginalizing female education. In many regions, girls' literacy rates plummeted as Western schools prioritized boys for administrative roles. Post-independence reforms. Pakistan's Fatima Jinnah. Women University, 1964, and Algeria's University of Constantine opened doors for thousands of women. Governments recognized that educated women raise literate communities, mirroring early Waqf legacies. Contemporary challenges, rural-urban divide. In remote provinces of Pakistan and Afghanistan, conservative norms restrict girls' schooling. Malala Yousafzai's campaign exposed how militant bans on education undermine not only women's rights, but societal resilience. STEM and scholarship. Across the Gulf, scholarship programs send female students to MIT, Oxford, and Sorbonne. Yet, brain drain and workplace discrimination often limit return on investment, as societal expectations confine women to traditional roles. Grassroots innovations, mobile madaris. In Kenya's Dadaab refugee camps, NGOs deploy mobile schools where women teach Quran and English literacy from solar-powered minibuses. These rolling classrooms reach communities where brick-and-mortar schools cannot. Digital platforms. Indonesian startup Nisa Learn offers free online courses in Arabic grammar and Islamic finance. Over 50,000 female learners registered within a year, citing flexibility for mothers and domestic workers. Transformative outcomes. Community leadership. Educated women in Tunisia's Ennahda movement now hold parliamentary seats and draft education legislation, ensuring curricula include gender-sensitive religious studies. Intergenerational impact. Studies in Morocco show that daughters of literate mothers are 60% more likely to complete secondary school, fueling a virtuous cycle of empowerment. When the text mandates learning for all, why do cultural barriers still prevail? Can digital and mobile solutions overcome entrenched norms, or do they risk creating parallel elite networks? What responsibility do religious and state institutions hold in making education universally accessible and honored as a sacred right? Beyond literacy lies the question of livelihoods. Economic agency transforms static recipients into active contributors. Islam's economic ethics envisioned women as entitled to trade, inheritance, and contract, but social conventions often curtailed these rights. Scriptural basis, right to trade. The Prophet's first wife, Khadijah, was a prosperous merchant who employed Muhammad. Her autonomy exemplifies that women's engagement in commerce is not peripheral, it is foundational. Contractual personhood. A mature woman signs contracts, owns property, and settles disputes in court without male intermediary. Affirmations of legal personhood rooted in AQD principles of consent and autonomy. Barriers to entry labor market. Segmentation. In many GCC states, women's labor force participation tops 50%, yet remains concentrated in education, health, and banking. Engineering, construction, and leadership roles see persistent gender gaps. Legal hurdles. Guardianship laws. In some jurisdictions require a male relative's permission for women to start businesses or travel, a de facto restriction on entrepreneurship. Innovative pathways. Microfinance for women. In Bangladesh, the Grameen Bank's interest-free Qard al-Hassan loans to female borrowers fund small enterprises. Over 85% of loans go to women, with repayment rates above 95%. This model aligns with Islamic prohibitions on riba while fostering independence. Social enterprises. Egypt's She Trades initiative empowers women artisans by connecting them to global e-commerce platforms. Handicrafts sales surged 70% after branding Waqf-backed cooperatives, blending tradition with technological outreach. Corporate leadership boardroom quotas. Indonesia's OJK regulations require at least 30% female representation on corporate boards. As a result, public companies report improved governance scores and social responsibility ratings. Female CEOs. In Malaysia, Zeti Akhtar Aziz's tenure as Bank Negara governor exemplifies that women not only participate, but can lead monetary policy and regulatory reform. Social impact poverty reduction. Studies from rural Pakistan show that women's earnings reinvested in health and education yield higher social returns than men's, evidencing that economic agency compounds communal well-being. Changing norms. As women taxi drivers and factory supervisors become visible in Saudi Arabia and Iran, societal perceptions shift, normalizing female public roles once deemed un-Islamic. If Islam enshrines economic equality, why do legal and cultural obstacles persist? Can Qard al-Hassan and Waqf-based models scale to address macroeconomic gender gaps? What institutional reforms are needed to ensure women's economic rights are realized, not just prescribed? Despite clear rights, many Muslim societies still wrestle with cultural resistance. Patriarchal norms often masquerade as religious mandates, policing women's mobility, speech, and ambitions. Yet, alongside this backlash, a vibrant Islamic feminist movement reshapes the narrative from within. Community policing of honor. In parts of South Asia and the Levant, honor councils enforce dress codes, restrict women's public presence, and stigmatize working outside the home. These assemblies, sometimes informal, sometimes backed by local courts, claim to uphold family dignity, but frequently infringe on women's autonomy. Case study. In rural Jordan, village elders once barred women from attending mixed-gender gatherings. When a young teacher defied this norm to run adult literacy classes, she faced threats of ostracism. It took a coalition of local imams invoking the Prophet's examples of women's public roles to overturn the ban. Digital dissent and grassroots activism, social media platforms have become battlegrounds for rights discourse. Hashtags like My Hijab, My Choice and Women to Win trend across the Middle East and North Africa, amplifying testimonies of women negotiating their own terms of dress, education, and employment. Online fatwa seekers. Women increasingly consult digital scholars on platforms like Telegram and YouTube, challenging conservative edicts. when a conservative council in Indonesia attempted to ban women from motorcycle taxis, outraged female riders live-streamed Quranic verses on female agency, forcing local ulama to retract the decree. Islamic feminist scholarship universities, from Al-Azhar's first female muftis to Harvard's Islam and Gender Studies, produce research reframing scriptural interpretations. Scholars like Amina Wadud and Kechia Ali argue for gender-equitable readings of inheritance and leadership verses, drawing on classical methodologies of linguistic and contextual analysis. Interfaith dialogues. In Malaysia, interreligious forums pair women from Muslim, Buddhist, and Christian communities to discuss shared challenges: domestic violence, work-life balance, legal guardianship. These conversations foster solidarity and pressure legislators to enact protective laws. Restorative circles for gender justice. Inspired by restorative justice models, some mosques host Circle of Sisters programs, safe spaces where survivors of abuse, discrimination, or marital discord share experiences. Facilitated by trained female imams and social workers, these circles integrate Quranic reflections on compassion with legal counseling, helping women navigate divorce, custody, and economic claims without fear. When centuries of custom conflict with clear texts which should guide the community, tradition or revelation? Can digital activism and feminist theology overcome entrenched power structures more effectively than top-down reforms? What role do male allies, imams, judges, educators, play in dismantling patriarchal norms under the banner of authentic Islam? Building on cultural shifts, several Muslim-majority states now revise laws to align practice with scriptural rights, targeting guardianship rules, workplace protections, and corporate governance. Guardianship Reforms, Saudi Arabia, 2021 amendments. Women over 21 no longer require male guardian approval to travel, marry, or obtain official documents. Driving reforms catalyzed broader scrutiny of guardianship, leading to Ministry of Justice directives assuring women's independent legal capacity. Tunisia's abolition. In 2014, Tunisia repealed remaining guardianship provisions, affirming that women possess full sui juris status at adulthood, a measure praised by UN Women as a regional milestone. Remaining challenges. Even where laws change, local officials may resist implementation. In some Gulf consulates, women still face delays obtaining passports without male co-signatures despite legal reforms. Workplace and labor rights, Egypt's equal pay initiatives. A 2019 labor law update mandates equal remuneration for comparable roles, backed by newly empowered labor inspectors. Women's union membership rose 40% as industries, from textiles to tech, sought to comply or face penalties. Indonesia's maternity protections, extended paid maternity leave, up to 6 months, under 2023 amendments fosters higher female workforce retention. Combined with national child care subsidies, these reforms signal that Islamic values of family welfare can drive progressive labor policy. Corporate quotas. Malaysia's 30% board quota and Pakistan's 10% quota for women in public companies demonstrate that deliberate targets can accelerate gender diversity at the executive level, echoing the Prophet's equal treatment ethos applied to modern governance. Judicial oversight and enforcement. Morocco's mixed courts. Family courts now include women judges and mandatory legal aid for low-income women, ensuring guardianship and inheritance laws are enforced fairly. Kuwait's Ombudsman Office. Tasked with monitoring gender discrimination, this body investigates complaints in public and private sectors, drawing from both civil codes and Sharia-based human rights provisions. Measuring impact. Economic growth. World Bank data shows that closing the gender gap in labor participation could boost GDP in MENA countries by up to 27%. Social indicators. In Tunisia and Morocco, reforms correlate with lower domestic violence reports and higher women's political participation, evidence that legal empowerment extends beyond courts into communal life. When states legislate women's equality, how do they ensure laws are practiced, not just proclaimed? Can quotas and formal protections recalibrate deeply rooted social attitudes, or do they risk tokenism? How might a synergy of legal reform and cultural revival forge lasting empowerment for Muslim women? Legal reforms and social movements are vital, but how do we gauge real equality? True empowerment shines through lived experience, not only statutes. Quantitative indicators, education and literacy. In Morocco, female secondary school graduation rose from 52% to 78% between 2004 and 2020, following curriculum reforms and girls' scholarship programs. Tunisia reports a similar leap, from 60% to 85%, after abolishing guardianship barriers to schooling. Labor force participation. Saudi Arabia's female workforce participation climbed from 17% in 2015 to 34% in 2023, driven by eased travel restrictions and professional licensing reforms. Indonesia's corporate board quotas helped push women into 30% of directorships by 2022. Inheritance claims. In Egypt, clinic data show that 70% of women who attend inheritance rights workshops successfully assert their Quranic shares, up from under 30% a decade earlier. Qualitative measures. Perceptions of autonomy. Surveys in Jordan and UAE indicate that 62% of women now feel they can make independent financial decisions, up from 45% in 2010, correlating with guardianship reforms. Social acceptance. Hashtags like My Hijab, My Choice and Women to Win trend regularly on regional social platforms, with thousands of testimonies of women freely choosing both modesty and professional ambition. Community narratives. Restorative justice circles report 80% participant satisfaction. Women leave with not just legal resolutions, but renewed confidence in their agency and community bonds. These metrics reveal a positive trajectory, but numbers don't tell the full story. True progress requires cultural embrace. When daughters see mothers in leadership roles and sons grow up respecting women's rights as divine, not concessionary. As we approach our finale, we return to the central paradox, that honoring Sharia and upholding human rights need not collide. They can co-create a dignified society. Reframing interpretation. Text and context. Every verse on inheritance, modesty, or education was revealed for 7th century Arabia, but its enduring principles transcend time, justice, compassion, and dignity. Through ijtihad, scholars can unlock these universal values for contemporary challenges. Maqasid-driven reform. By prioritizing the higher objectives, preserving life, intellect, lineage, wealth, and faith, we align legal change with divine wisdom, ensuring reforms reinforce spiritual and social well-being. Conscience as arbiter, internal witness. The ultimate judge of any law is the heart that embraces it freely. When women pursue knowledge, inherit property, or choose their dress out of conviction, not coercion, they actualize both Sharia and human rights. Communal responsibility. Men and women together bear the task of nurturing environments where conscience guides action. Imams, judges, educators, and policymakers must model empathy, fairness, and open dialogue, inviting hearts to choose virtue. A call to collective action, institutional synergy. Establish family courts with balanced benches. Embed gender-sensitive curricula in religious and secular schools. Fund mobile madaris and digital learning for remote areas. Grassroots engagement. Support NGOs offering legal clinics and restorative circles. Celebrate women's achievements in media. Amplify voices challenging patriarchal misuses of tradition. Policy commitment. Ratify international covenants without reservations that undermine equality. Legislate transparent enforcement of inheritance and labor rights. Monitor implementation at local levels. Indeed, Allah commands you to render trusts to whom they are due, and when you judge between people, judge with justice. Quran 4:58, thematic echo. In this divine injunction, we find our roadmap: justice tempered by mercy, law guided by conscience, and freedom grounded in sacred purpose. This is the path to genuine empowerment. As women's rights in Islam evolve, let us remember, progress is not a zero-sum game. When half the community thrives, all benefit. May our shared efforts yield societies where every daughter, sister, and mother stands in dignity before both divine decree and human law. As we conclude our exploration, we face a central challenge: forging a social covenant that honors both Sharia's divine wisdom and universal human rights. This covenant rests on four pillars: freedom of conscience, constitutional safeguards, guarantee every individual the right to worship, or not, without legal penalty. Embed clear clauses that no citizen is compelled to practice religious rites outside private devotion. Non-discrimination. Prohibit bias on gender, belief, or dress code in public institutions. Ensure dress choices, hijab, niqab, or no veil, remain personal decisions protected by law. Voluntary jurisdiction, family courts, by consent. Allow parties to choose Sharia-based tribunals for marriage, divorce, and inheritance only if both spouses agree. Otherwise, secular civil courts adjudicate, ensuring fairness under international norms. Council of Ijtihad. Establish an independent body of qualified jurists and human rights experts issuing advisory interpretations on new social and technological issues, never binding but guiding legislation. Deliberative democracy. Ethical assemblies. Civic forums begin with moments of silent reflection, invoking inner discipline before policy debates. Legislators consult both civil and religious perspectives, crafting laws that reflect shared maqasid, higher objectives. Educational synergy. Curricula. Integrate constitutional principles and core Sharia objectives, justice, mercy, dignity, equipping citizens to navigate both divine guidance and civic duty. Restorative justice mediation circles. Replace punitive responses for moral disputes, slander, minor family conflicts, with community-led reconciliation panels. Trained mediators draw on Quranic ethics of forgiveness, fostering healing over retribution. Charitable solidarity. Direct waqf and zakah funds to victim support and community development, demonstrating that divine charity underwrites social repair and collective welfare. Ask yourself, what if the most binding law is the one we choose freely, grounded in conscience and compassion? In this model, Sharia and secular law dance in harmony. Divine principles inspire humane legislation. Democratic processes give voice to sacred values. You have journeyed through 8 scenes, from modesty and scholarship to inheritance and empowerment, from inner struggle to digital frontiers. The picture that emerges is clear. Islam's true strength lies not in coercion, but in freedom, consecrated by conscience. May this dialogue spark your own reflections. Will you champion laws that invite virtue, not impose it? Will you defend conscience as the highest court? Will you build communities where divine law and human dignity walk hand in hand? I am Fakir al-Khamosh. In the silence of your heart, may you find the courage to choose justice, mercy, and freedom for yourself and for all